Welcome to the Exploring Unschooling podcast. For countless parents, the journey to unschooling has redefined childhood and transformed their family relationships. Are you curious? Together, let's explore what living and learning looks like without school. Hello, explorers. I'm Pam Laricchia, and this is episode number 229 of the podcast. It's the 3rd of June, 2020, as I record this intro. And this week, I have put together a compilation episode focusing on the shift away from using control as a parenting tool and toward connection and engagement with our kids. Though it takes time to put a compilation episode together, I love hearing these clips side by side. I think it can help spark new insights around parenting tools, parent-child relationships, and the kind of parent we want to be. As a personal update, much of my time this week has been spent gardening. Rhubarb, strawberries, blueberries, raspberries. The fruit is new, so I look forward to seeing how it goes. And next up is veggies. Before we get to the episode, I want to take a moment to thank everyone who has chosen to support the podcast through Patreon. And a big welcome to new patron Shannon Picard. Hi, Shannon! I deeply appreciate all my patrons. Your generous support not only lets me know that you enjoy the show and want it to continue, it allows me to spend time creating episodes like this each week and to keep the podcast archive freely available to anyone who's curious and wants to explore the fascinating world of unschooling. If you'd like to join my community of patrons and scoop up some great rewards along the way, check out the Exploring Unschooling page at patreon.com. That's patreon.com/exploring unschooling. And now let's dive into this fascinating compilation. Hi, everyone. I've really enjoyed putting this compilation episode together for you. And this time the lens is on parenting and the shift away from control as a parenting tool. See, often it's reasonably easy to understand why you want to stop using control and punishment, but that's just the first step. You need to replace it with something different, or else you end up creating a vacuum of nothingness that eventually devolves into chaos. In this episode, I've woven together answers from 6 unschooling parents. This is a bigger question around shifting our parenting paradigm from having control over our children to being in connection with them. So you'll notice the clips are longer too. It's not a quick answer kind of topic, but I think you'll get a lot out of this deep dive. And to get us started, Teresa Graham-Brett, unschooling mom and author of Parenting for Social Change, shares her thoughts around this parenting shift. You identify a number of tools that parents can use as they shift from controlling parenting to supportive parenting. And there are 3 I thought I'd pick out that I'd love for you to touch on. They are accepting our feelings, mindfulness, and awareness. So I was hoping you could describe what those are and a little bit about how we can shift away from the impulse to control in those areas.
Great. I think I'll start with the feelings, accepting our feelings. I think as I really dug in to try to figure out why my first reaction was to control, I really had to look and understand that, that in my own childhood, and frankly, for most of us, we're seeing generations now of unschoolers, right? Adults who are now having children and, or who grew up in that way. But the vast majority of us grew up within controlling systems and family structures and relationships. That's just the way the world has been. And so, one of the things that I realized, my struggle to control, when I was in the need to control, underneath it was really a fear and a feeling of not being safe. That when things are in control, we feel safe. Oh, it's all under control. We're good. All right. I don't have to worry about anything.
Yep.
How many times have I said that to myself? Still say it to myself, right? Okay, everything's under control. I can go do this thing. And so when I then began to say, well, why is it control equals safety? And then I began to understand that we learn lots of messages, and I learned them too in different dynamics in my family, that when the adults around me were out of control, like they were yelling and upset, I did not feel safe, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
When things were volatile or people got mad about the dishes or whatever it was, I was like, ooh, I'm going to go hide because that's easier and it's safer if I'm, And we also get these messages growing up that about our emotions. So you mentioned this earlier. The emotion that wasn't allowed in my family, this is where it's unique to each person, right? Your own family experience. The emotion that wasn't allowed in my family was anger. I couldn't express anger. Even though all the adults around me expressed a whole lot of anger in not very healthy ways, of course, I couldn't express that same anger, and sadness, like neutral and slightly happy were good. Like that was the range of acceptable emotion, not too happy, because then that's uncomfortable for my parents. So you could be in this one range. And so what I learned then was to push down feelings of sadness and feelings of anger. And because the adults around me, when they expressed anger, it wasn't safe. It was a volatile situation. What I learned then is anger results in harm. So my own anger became my enemy. So when anger would well up in me, I would push it down. And then if it burst out, at some point it's going to burst out. The more you try to control it, it's going to come out. Then my feelings of guilt, I would beat myself up. I would tell myself what a horrible parent or person I was. I punished myself as much as I was punished as a child. I learned to punish myself. So the accepting my feelings, and for each of us, it'll be different what those feelings are. Accepting those feelings as part of the human experience and saying, I feel angry. That's not a bad person feeling. I'm not a bad person because I feel a feeling. I'm not a bad person because I feel sad, because I want to cry. It is the full range of human experience. And what I learned was, I think you said this about discomfort, about when something's triggering you or making you uncomfortable, that's the sign for you to go in.
Yep.
I had to learn that accepting anger and moving toward my anger, saying, I can go and be angry and feel that, and I'm safe and other people will be safe. It's okay. I can explore where that anger comes from. I can understand anger, and anger can be a friend. Anger can be something that tells me something about myself. So accepting those feelings that had been punished when I was a child was such an important part of my own process. So for each of us, it's going to be different what those feelings are, but we deny all of those that we learned were bad in our families or in our schools or whatever it was. So I think
I know I was just going to say it's such a huge piece of our own growing self-awareness, right? And nothing triggers us to start developing that as coming to unschooling, right?
Yes. And I think then what the mindfulness piece, all of these things all interconnect, because I had to be willing to be present with myself. As you said earlier, and as I've said, when those uncomfortable feelings hit us, when the discomfort is there, the ability to sit with that and be present with it is so difficult.
Yeah.
And so that mindfulness, that in the moment now, where am I at and what's going on for me? But then also mindfulness and presence with the child. That even I'm just going to sit right now, and even though I feel 100 things are pulling on me, I'm going to watch this video that he wants me to watch, and just be there. Or go ahead.
I was just going to say that's such a huge piece, right? And I think that's something that, for me anyway, that's something I learned through experience, because people would say, make that a top priority. I'm like, okay, I'll try. But it's like, after a few times, it's like, wow, what I learned in that half hour beats like every other choice I could have had.
Yeah.
Right. So that mindfulness to be with them, and that mindfulness with myself to take a beat, when some emotion or some feeling was welling up, that those were huge tools for me.
Yeah, yeah. And even that mindfulness of where my feelings show up of feeling out of control, unsafe, or angry, it always shows up in my stomach.
Ah,
So the place it shows up is I start to feel a little funky in my stomach. Sometimes it shows
yeah.
up as hunger, but it's not hunger, it's anger. Sometimes it shows up as
Ah,
nausea because, oh my gosh, something's really making me so uncomfortable. I'm starting to feel a little bit nauseous. So I started paying attention to those early signals. What's going on? Oh, wait, something's happening in my stomach. All right, give me a moment. Give me a moment, guys. I just gotta have a moment, and to ask for that time in for me. Like, I need a moment. This is really intense. Sometimes it would
yeah.
be just to close my eyes in the midst of what was going around me for just a moment and say, I'm feeling something. Even if I couldn't name exactly what the feeling was, just say, oh, I'm aware. My mindfulness allows me to tap into, close my eyes. It's in my stomach. I'm feeling something. And then move on. What's the next thing that's going to. So
I know
that
sometimes the physical reaction shows up first, right? You
it
don't even,
does. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So the mindfulness piece is both with ourselves and then also with the child. I know that when I'm in that angry mode and what I want to do is lash out, if I get down and I really just observe the child, like look in their eyes, it's so easy to dehumanize. And none of us want to think we dehumanize our children.
Yeah.
But it's easy if all we see are the externals, like not like the messy house, the toys poured out on the floor, the mess, whatever, the spill, whatever it is, we look at that rather than the child. And that moment of mindfulness to just say, look at his eyes, look at him, notice his nose, notice the hair. Notice the things you really, really love. Like if I could take that moment in those intense times, like that 2 to 6 years old. And even now I
Yeah.
do it at 9 and 14, like breathe and oh my gosh, look at him. And that's that moment I need to at least hold back from the lash out. And then even if there's a lash out, there's ways to come back from that. We can talk about that. And then the last thing is the awareness piece. For me, the awareness had to do with multiple levels of awareness. Awareness that I was trained to be this way. Like all of my early training in childhood, the systems, the school systems, my family system, all of those things trained my brain, right? Our neural pathways.
Yep.
That are activated, reactivated, and reactivated over and over. Like those things I was trained to do. So that awareness that I'm trained to be in this place and I can unlearn it, like that hope, I can unlearn it. And to know that that's what operates and that gets reinforced even now in the media, the messages I might get from family, all of those things reinforce that control dynamic. And then what are my particular triggers so that enter in my own personal awareness? So food was a trigger for a long, long, long time. Sometimes still comes up for me. There are other things that are triggers for me. So my awareness of this is a soft spot for me. I'm sensitive about this thing. So knowing that, this might come up. Okay, so how do I take care of myself? How do I recognize that that's a place of healing, that that's a place I need to go deeper in, that awareness of my own dynamics, internal dynamics, and even the dynamics I may have set up in my relationship with the child, because we get into patterns with them. And even as we're undoing what we did before, those patterns come back into play. And so we can even acknowledge that, we're stuck in this pattern. So sometimes I would even say, like, if we were in the car and there's a lot that happens in cars, if people have cars and they travel by cars, there's a lot that happens. I would say, I've got to pull over and just step out. Like, this is not working. I need to step out for a minute and, change that energy pattern or change that pattern of interaction. Or I can say, you know what, I'm getting intense. I'm going to step away. So those things, that awareness at systems and maybe my history level, how I'm trained in those ways, and then what are my own particular triggers, and then the awareness of the child. So each of them are so different. The things that I could say to one, I can't say to the other. So the things that hurt one much, much more are very different from the things that might hurt the other one. The ways in which Martell needs me to reconnect after I've maybe, lashed out or lost it or gotten upset or intense about something are so different from the ways Grayson needs me to reconnect and apologize. So that awareness of what do they need from me, and did I even hurt them? Maybe I didn't. And it's just me,
Exactly. Sometimes so much is caught up in our own history, right? As you said, it's totally individual with each child, and our children, as they get older, they get to know us too. And they're aware of our triggers or our personality, all those pieces. Like, I think I've mentioned before on an episode that my kids know, I need a minute to absorb, quick changes in plans and stuff like that. I have to kind of process through that. I can't really just go, hey, cool. So they are happy to give me that beat. Hey, Mom, I'm thinking about this. Can you think about it? And I'll come back in 5 minutes or whatever. The same way. And that's all learned empathy and relationship skills because of the way we've treated and supported and respected them too, right?
Yeah.
Such great tools Teresa shared for the journey, accepting our feelings, mindfulness, and awareness. And each of those has so many layers. Next, let's hear from Scott Noel. Scott is an unschooling dad of 2, an author, and a life coach dedicated to supporting parents who want to move away from control-based parenting methods. Here's what he shared about the pull we can feel to use control when we're uncomfortable with our children's choices. As our children get older, we touched on this a little bit before. We can sometimes find ourselves feeling uncomfortable with some of their choices, the things that they're pursuing and that feel really good to them. And when we start feeling that fearfulness, we start to feel protective of them. And that's when we can so easily slip into control, because that is what we live with, right? That's the go-to response of our culture. You know, your parents' job is to say, no, sorry, you can't do that. And then impose some consequences. Say, if I find that you're doing X, you're going to lose this privilege or whatever if they disobey. So I just thought we could talk a bit about how that can damage your relationship, that trust, that connection, and what we might do instead when we're starting to feel overly protective and fearful.
Wow, that's really big. I mean, I think the word consequences is ripe for deconstruction, and it is one of the most disingenuous words in the whole parenting lexicon, because people talk about consequences when they're really talking about a punishment. It's just a way to control people. And I always say the only authentic consequence is love, right? It's like, whatever you do, I love you, period. That's the consequence. And what that means is that, if you behave in a way that I don't like, then that means we need to tend to the partnership. This is why I think partnership is one of the most central concepts that I talk about in being with children. And unschooling really is a kind of partnership education. You're partnering with the child and with their nature. But in a behavior situation, rather than, sort of the old view is that the child is supposed to behave a certain way, and I have the right to control that. And if you're in a partnership orientation, say, well, we each have equal dignity. Obviously, we're not equal in every way. I'm older, more experienced, and I have more legal rights, et cetera, et cetera. But as human beings, we're equal, and I have no more right to control my child than my child has a right to control me. But we're not particularly interested in controlling each other. We're interested in having an enjoyable partnership. And that does mean that we are interacting and we are, it's not so much controlling each other as doing a dance together. Right. Mm-hmm. And that means we need to be attuned with each other. We need to understand each other's needs. And we need to be first and foremost, I think we need to just sort of be committed to being creative, because it's inevitable that there are going to be situations where what I want and what my child wants are not the same thing. And then it looks like a win-lose situation. And when it looks like that, we have the power to choose a different perspective, that it doesn't have to be win-lose. It can be win-win. And I like to say it's a win-win-win, because I win, you win, and the partnership wins. The partnership gets stronger. But that, in order to create those win-win outcomes, you really have to be committed to a creative process. That every time we seem to be at odds, it's an opportunity to be co-creators and to step into a collaborative process, I guess. And that's, if we can avoid the reactivity and the tendency to move into blame and just sort of hold presence long enough to calm ourselves down, then we can actually move into that creative process and really enjoy it and say, well, okay, wait a minute. Sorry, I overreacted. What I really want to understand is, what are you needing here? And I want you to understand what I'm needing here. And let's just assume that in this universe of infinite possibilities, there is at least one possibility where both of us meet our needs, or both of us satisfy our desires. And those creative possibilities that you discover in that process can often be, better than what you wanted in the first place. And maybe it's not. Maybe it's just different, or maybe it's even a little bit inferior in terms of like what would have been perfectly ideal for you. But on the bigger picture, it's a better outcome because you have this stronger partnership. And that pays off big time in the long term. I like to say that, if your kids are still young and you commit yourself to cultivating a partnership culture in your family, then you have, plenty of years to do it. And by the time they're teenagers, you don't have any of the problems, or very little of the problems that are typical of teenagers. If you've made that effort. And I'm not saying that we've had no problems, but definitely not some of the horror stories that I hear, or some of the sad situations that I see where young adults and their parents don't like each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think so much of what we've been talking about this whole time leads up to this, right? Because it's that when you're feeling the urge to control, I think that's a great point to try and see that as a clue that it's time to refocus back on partnership. Right. And that reminds you, okay, it reminds you to look at the situation from their perspective, from their eyes, and not even from, like what I would do in their situation, because I'm not them.
Right.
It's to see the whole situation, from inside them, right? From their perspective, why this is important to them. Because once you have that understanding of where they're coming from, at least, you can bring that like to your whole co-creation conversation. That's how we can find a path forward as partners where we're all reasonably satisfied. Like you said, it may not be like the perfect, but when we can find something where we're all like, yeah, okay, I can live with that. I can do that. That works. You know, I love that third win, because that's when the partnership becomes more solid, becomes again another layer of connected and trusting, because you have again found a way through this. So yeah, I think that's a beautiful way to think about it, as a win-win-win.
Totally. And I would even go a step further for those who are adventurous in the realms of consciousness, that you can actually, I mean, what you said, I think is true, to say, well, what would I do, or what would I want? And then to remember, well, but I'm not her, or I'm not him.
Yeah.
But on a deeper level, you can actually say, I am her, like in a sort of more esoteric, new agey, we're all one kind of thing.
Yeah.
And if you cultivate that consciousness of oneness, and it's a sort of a paradox, we're separate and we're connected, right? But we tend to focus in our culture more on the separateness and not that much on the connectedness. So you can actually play thought games and decide, okay, for the next 20 minutes, I'm going to fully wholeheartedly inhabit the perspective of my child. And, if they love something that I think is meh, I'm going to love it, right? And just feel that. And that opens you up to discovering deeper kinds of connection, but also even just things where, my opinion about that one thing wasn't fully informed. Now that I've totally stepped into my child world, I have a greater appreciation for that.
Oh, so many times when I've done that, like when I felt uncomfortable, and then it's like, okay, so where is this? And putting myself, you can think of it that way as us being one, but putting myself in their spot so many times, I was able to stretch my comfort zone, is kind of how I've talked about it before, because all of a sudden it's like, wow, those pieces that I was bringing into my thoughts, or maybe they were some stereotypes that I picked up, or some negative experience that I had, those were clouding my vision, and my perspective grew just by taking the time to see it how they see it. And often, regularly enough anyway, the whole kind of problem dissolved, because I realized it was just me stretching a little bit to really see them. I love Scott's win-win-win perspective, and his reminder that it can be fascinating and fun to play thought games, like choosing to fully and wholeheartedly inhabit our child's perspective for a while and see what we discover. Next up is Jan Fortune. Jan home educated her 4 now adult children in the UK and wrote many articles and 5 books on unschooling and consent-based parenting. We talked about how moving away from control isn't about surrendering to our children, it's about engaging with them. In your book, which I loved, Winning Parent, Winning Child, you make a great point about how consent-based parenting is not a call for parental self-surrender or martyrdom. Rather, it's a call for engagement with our children. And that was just a great example of the value we get from engaging with our children, right? So you talk about how there may be times when a mutual solution escapes us and we choose to put our children first, but that's not ideal. So even though sacrifice is often held up as a virtue in our society, why is simply giving in not a good long-term solution either?
I think it's important to recognise that sometimes we fail. We don't always find solutions where, we're ordinary human beings and those moments are going to happen. And when we do fail, I put the child first simply because we have such an enormous responsibility to children. They're the people we chose to bring into the world. So there are occasions when that's going to happen. But I think when we end up finding ourselves self-sacrificing on a regular basis, we really need to stop and check that for lots of reasons. For one thing, self-sacrifice cuts creativity dead. If you've spent hours trying to find a solution to no avail and you're too exhausted to keep going, you sometimes need to cut your losses. But if you cut your losses early in the process just to speed things up, then all you do is kind of cut into that creative energy that you might have found 10 minutes down the line. You might have come up with a great solution. So I think when we kind of get in there too fast and just shrug our shoulders and go, oh, okay, then I give in, you've short-circuited all of that creativity. I think the other really damaging thing about self-sacrifice is it builds resentment. A person who's always giving in might seem as though they're okay about it, but over time it eats away. And I think that poisons the atmosphere of being solution-centered and trying to be creative. And chronic self-sacrifices, if you've kind of experienced those in your lives, can often become quite passive-aggressive manipulators. The person who just always says, oh, I don't mind, is often saying to the group, well, actually, I want you to guess what I'd like, but I'm not going to put in the energy to tell you. You have to guess and you have to get it right. They're not really being open and honest. So I think self-sacrifice when you've run out of steam is one thing. Self-sacrifice as a pattern tends to have all this kind of other emotional baggage with it. So certainly don't be harsh with yourself when you have moments of failure. They're going to happen to everybody. But I think if you notice that pattern of self-sacrificing or somebody never stating their needs, it's really time to kind of dig into that and try and shift it, because in the long term it breeds bad feeling and it sabotages our creativity.
I love that. It's such a great point. Patterns are the things to watch out for, aren't they? Right? When, because I'm trying to remember what I was I had something great. But, that was it. When we're, like you said, we're talking and we're trying to figure something out and maybe we, lose, energy for it. And we, say, okay, you know what, we'll try it your way because, why not? You haven't come up with a good enough reason not to.
Yeah.
Exactly. But when there's that pattern and you give up earlier and earlier with less and less effort, not only are you losing your creativity, you're also losing those moments to learn more about our children and ourselves,
Absolutely.
aren't we?
Yeah. I mean, it just kind of, it eats into all of that, really. So, and patterns are definitely the thing to look for.
Yeah, exactly. There's just so much relationship development that goes in there. And your point before about the time that we're investing, this is what we're choosing to put our time in when we're not putting it into school and all those other things. We're choosing to create this kind of learning environment because learning about ourselves and learning how to connect with others and work through issues with others, these are all valuable and important skills that a lot of kids who spend all their time in school don't have a lot of time to develop, do they?
No, absolutely. I mean, they're missing that. And that's what we've set this up for. So, use it.
And I'd like to dig into this transition to consent-based parenting a little bit more. And in the book, you wrote, consent works best when everyone in the family, adults and children alike, see themselves as free, respected people who can live the life they prefer within the family group. When this happens, adults and children can all be open to changing their wishes without ever fearing that it will mean doing something they really don't want to do. This releases an enormous flood of innovative thinking for solving problems, like that creative thinking that we were just talking about. But I do think that this is something that can be so hard to envision, to believe that it will actually happen until you see it in action. And I remember there were a couple of valuable mind shifts that helped me to make this shift to consent-based parenting. One was ensuring that my wishes were not about my children. You know what? That was something that was surprisingly hard to tease out. I kind of had to empty myself out and then start adding my needs and wants back in one at a time, playing with them to see if they were really mine, not, oh, I wish my child would do this, or I wish they liked this. So, the other one was being open to changing my mind, right? Or my wishes even. And that was so much work to get deep into my own thoughts and to be okay with not liking what I found at first. Because, I'm just thinking. So it was so valuable for me to show by example that our discussion was about the ideas and our needs, and to be able to say, wow, that's a great point that I didn't consider. I'm more open to doing it your way. Let's see. Yeah. And then not act like I've given in when I've changed my mind, right? There's a difference. Because if you act like you've given in, then it's kind of like now they owe you something next time. Like you were talking about that passive aggressive approach to it all. There's just so much wrapped up in there, isn't there? So I was wondering if you had some tips that you could share about this transition and how it really cracks open that creative problem-solving process.
Yeah. I mean, I think you've highlighted those shifts really well. Changing your mind because you've become open is completely different to self-sacrificing that we were just discussing. Absolutely crucial. If you see adults as the people with all the answers and the children as the ones in training, then doing that's going to feel counterintuitive. But if you shift your mindset so that you believe we're all learners, we've all got different sorts of experience, different sorts of creativity, fresh thinking. It doesn't matter where the solution to a problem comes from or whether it happened to be suggested by a 2-year-old or a 35-year-old. It's just a creative solution. And part of that genuinely flexible open-mindedness has to be that we don't have preconceived ideas about what we want our children to be or to do. Your needs have to be yours, just as you were saying, and we hold those tentatively and creatively. So, my need is for you to clean your room really misses the point. My need might be to have some clean, calm space. That's fine. And then I can invite others to help me with that rather than implicating them in what they have to do or what has to happen, because they might not have any need at all to have a clean room. If children don't feel you've already made up your mind about what the outcome has to be, if you're genuinely open-minded and you treat them as people who have something to offer, then they've got nothing to lose in contributing their creativity. And once they see that this creativity is taken seriously, more and more of it's forthcoming. So I think it's about that creating of a positive spiral rather than a kind of downward slope. Just, getting in there and being really flexible. And as you say, owning your needs as yours and then saying, how can we help with this? So you are asking them for help in the same way as they ask you for help. It becomes this community of creative people who are sorting out how they live together.
Yeah, that's such a great point, because when, if it's all situations come up for discussion, right? What the kids want to do, and we try to make that happen, and what we want to do, that they're all equally valuable and deserving of discussion. And the other piece when you were talking about cleaning their room and stuff like that, the other piece about being so open and us changing our minds is showing them that it's okay to change your mind. Over the years, my kids have enjoyed messy rooms, and then they've gone through times when they really liked keeping it organized. Yeah. And you don't want them to think, okay, this feeling about wanting it organized isn't in reaction, like you don't want them to ignore it because they feel like they'd be finally satisfying your need for a clean room, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's, not setting up those, it's that kind of emotional baggage again, isn't it? That can underpin things. And if that's not there, then people can freely move positions without that kind of fearfulness or feeling that they're going to be looked down on because they held a position and now they don't. We all change all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Another aspect of the transition to consent-based parenting that I wanted to touch on is moving beyond the conventional idea that children will tend towards bad choices if they aren't controlled, right? As we move to unschooling, we discover that what our children really lack is just experience, especially if we've been parenting with rules and controls for years. Our children have had little experience with understanding themselves, their needs, how to make reasoned choices, how to move through that process. So at first, they may behave in ways that may seem to us, at least, as irrational, right? Yet that is still not a sufficient justification for falling back on control and compulsion, is it? There is another way that we can look at those kinds of situations.
Yeah, that's exactly right. If you've got years of compulsion to undo, then there's going to be some disbelief on the part of those children when you say that's gone now, and there's going to be some testing out. And that can be very, very hard and very scary. But I think the thing to hold on to is every time you slide back into compulsion, that trust is diminished. And so, that can create real vicious circles. Once you've established that trust, of course you won't get it right every time, but that trust will see you through. So, when situations go wrong still, you can still go, this is what, we were really intending. This is what we're now getting, 60% of the time, 70% of the time, we're working, it's growing. And I think just being really open and honest with the children that this is a big change for you as well, and you're going to struggle with it. And so, we just have to be on side with each other and have to be kind to each other. But this is the direction we're really going in. So in the transition, we need to look at what might be irrational choices as maybe just establishing that trust and then building towards creativity. And that does sometimes take a lot of holding your breath or biting your tongue and just kind of seeing where it leads and talking all the time. I mean, I think the big thing is that you're constantly conversing about this. You're constantly reassuring. You're constantly saying, oh, I got that wrong. How do we go back to the drawing board? I don't understand your decision there, but it's your decision. Can you tell me more about it? And just keeping those channels as open as you possibly can.
I love that. And that's the hard part, I think, especially at the beginning, right? It's you're biting your tongue, yet you're having conversation. It's a different kind of conversation now, right? Totally different.
Yeah, it's not a conversation about judgment anymore.
Conversation or telling them what to do.
Understand.
Yeah, it's I love that, because when you're picking their brain, but you're right, if you do it with whether it's that passive aggressive approach or that judgment in your voice, they can tell. And like you said, you're taking a step backwards. You're losing that piece of ground of trust that you had been gaining. So, that is something you really want to watch out for. But when you start asking those questions, your child has probably not been asked those kinds of questions before, right? They've just been told.
That's surprising.
Yeah, they're discovering so much about themselves just by even considering the question. Oh, geez, I've never wondered what I thought about that.
It opens up a very different space, I think.
Yeah, so much learning for everybody, isn't it? Such a rich discussion around the transition away from control and to consent. And next, we hear from Megan Valnes. Megan is an unschooling mom with 6 children, and we have so much fun diving deep into her deschooling experience, including this bit about the transition from control to connection. So, and another important aspect of this deschooling process revolves around parenting, and it lines up a lot with what you were talking about with your son, because it turns out that helping our children's learning thrive and just helping them thrive as individuals means shifting our parenting paradigm, right? From having control over our children, right? Even if it's just wishing that I wish he would get up and play and do all these wonderful things that we can now do because he's home, to being in connection with our children, right? to starting to understand their perspective, and that huge piece that you talked about, you mentioned it, but I think it's a huge piece, is that judging ourselves or seeing ourselves from what our children are choosing to do, right?
Yes.
So I was just wondering if you could talk a bit about what that shift has looked like for you.
Yes. So that piece about the reflection of our children, or our children being a reflection of us, it's so cultural, and so that's something in our paradigm. That's one of those things for myself I didn't even realize I was doing. But I was like doing it overtime. So
I know that.
I was working overtime on that one. Before unschooling, that was just a completely foreign thought to me, I think. I never really thought about it. I grew up with parents that loved me very much but didn't really play with me, and it was never expected that they would play with me.
Yeah.
That just wasn't their role, I grew up thinking being a good parent meant you kept your kids clean and like nice looking. You educated them. They had manners, and you didn't really need to play with them. So with my oldest, I didn't, it's so regretful to think about it now, but I didn't really play with him when he was little. And God, one of my biggest regrets is I sleep trained him. Which I went to, I was 22 years old when I had my oldest son. I was kind of a baby. Now that I'm older, I'm like, oh my God, I really was young. And I never thought about it. I never even thought about the fact that I was young to have a baby. For me, I had always wanted children, and I wanted children young, and the women in my family tend to have children young. So to me, that was just normal. And so anyways, I was 22 years old when I had him, and I just really wanted to do everything right. I truly believed what I was doing was the best thing for him. And my husband hated that I sleep trained him and would always just want to, bring him in with us. And he was probably 12 weeks old when I did that. And so I still nursed him for a long time, but that right there disconnected me from my son. Putting him in a crib and letting him cry to sleep was a huge disconnection for us. And I never did it again with any of my other children because I knew innately it was wrong in my gut. But at the time, at that age, I wasn't really able to even be connected to myself and my own intuition and my mother's intuition. I didn't trust myself enough to connect with myself. And therefore, how could I connect with my children on that level? Which is another huge part of the trust component in unschooling. And I forget who said, John Holt says, we're raised our whole lives as children believing we can't be trusted. So it's no wonder we turn into adults that don't trust ourselves. And then again, don't trust our children. And then, so it's just this like revolving cycle. So it has to stop somewhere, right? We've got to change it. And so, being disconnected, was what was normal for me. Yeah. And so when I came to unschooling and was starting to let go of all those controls, that led me to start learning more about myself and why I had those control issues over my children, and what did that mean for me? Like, how did I need to connect back into myself and connect with them? So connecting with them and really making the effort to play with them, to watch TV with them, to sit on the couch and watch my son's shows with him, to play their computer games, to really get into their world helped me heal and helped me learn, I think, what a true connection means. And so that was just part of the work and the process of putting down all those thoughts and ideas and opinions that I thought were so right and shifting my perspective and trying something new. Because playing with my kids was really foreign to me. But at the same time, Pam, the weird thing is that I was only this kind of person parenting. I've always been, fun and a little bit crazy and a little bit wild, right? And wanting to do things, and I just have kind of a vivacious personality. It's who I am. But when it came to parenting, I would turn into this different person. Like I said, I had to put on this persona, and I sort of turned into what I thought was right, and it wasn't right. And
that's such a great point, though, because it's our chance to be good, right? Like we said, we're seeing our value or our worth as a parent reflected through our children,
right?
So that drives us to control them to be perfect, so that we can look perfect,
exactly,
because this is our shot,
right?
Because we know what a good parent looks like, right?
Right, exactly.
Conventionally, So, when especially when you've bought into that whole paradigm, you're just really pulled to accomplish it, right? Yes. I know what you mean.
And always so worried about how other people are judging the situation. Because, like, for myself, I never really cared what people thought about me. But all of a sudden, when I had kids, it was like, man, these kids need to be perfect. And people need to think that I'm doing a great job and know that I'm a fit parent, Yeah. And where does it,
that's why when you're shifting away from that control, you're like, now what, right? And like you said, you have to learn so much about yourself,
right?
So that you can even connect to somebody, because you can't really see. It's very hard to see from somebody else's perspective until you got to start somewhere. You got to start with your own,
right? Exactly. And sometimes it's fake it till you make it. I found, because in the beginning I didn't really understand what I was doing, but I did it anyway. I kind of went through the steps, and first off, it was just opening my mind to the fact that what my kids were watching on TV was really great. And was it funny? And can I get into it with them? And I could. And so it's just somewhere. Even if in my head I was thinking, oh my God, I can't believe we're watching this Barbie movie. And or whatever I was thinking in my head, I didn't say it out loud. It was also learning to control my mouth.
It's like 1,000,001 little shifts.
Yes,
at first, every day,
and
every day. It's like,
sorry, go ahead. No, I'm just going to say sorry. I think as parents, we feel like it's our right to just unload our opinion on our kids.
Yeah.
In conventional parenting, do you notice that? Like, you'll tell your kid to be like, oh my God, your hair is a wreck, your breath stinks, go brush your teeth. Like, you would never say that to anyone else.
Yeah.
And somehow it's okay to say that to your children, right? And it's more conventional, so you hear it all around you. So becoming more mindful also is a huge part in connecting. Being more mindful of what you say and how you say it, and how are you treating these people that happen to be your children, who, by the way, didn't ask to be born. You brought them into this world.
All that ties together so nicely because it's all about being able to stop for that moment, right? And just contemplate, like not just react, not just say, oh, your hair or whatever. So what is, ooh, your hair, or ooh, this TV show or whatever. Just back to what we were talking about before, about just being open to those moments, just kind of passing by and just contemplating them for a little bit, and doing that shift over again. Oh, look, but we're having fun. We're watching this TV show for the 100th time. But we're having fun. We're laughing. It's this whole conversation that goes on in your head, isn't it?
Right. Yes. Exactly. And that's better, to learn that sometimes we just need to keep it in our head or talk to our friends about it, but we don't have to unload it on our kids. Yeah. Let them have their own experience.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Then that's part of the just staying back and observing a little bit.
Totally.
Like, you're with them and connecting, but you don't have to verbalize everything, right?
Right.
To see how they take it in. And I learned so much because they see things differently. And that was all part of my deschooling.
Yes.
To realize that the way they see things is just as valid.
It's almost even more valid because it's coming from a more pure perspective, I think. It doesn't come with all our baggage, right? Like, I had a lot of, in the beginning, I had a lot of opinions that were just weighed down by like all this baggage and my own experience and how I was really projecting this now onto my kids or onto their experience and not letting them just be an individual in the world doing something and having their unique experience with it. And that's even hard to understand, but it's, to allow them to be their own person, separate from us. Does that make sense?
Huge.
Yeah, it's huge.
It is huge. And it's so valuable for us to see it too, and it was seeing it so often, so many things on my unschooling journey and deschooling journey for myself have been because I saw them in my children.
Right.
It's
yes.
Like,
or they pointed
saw
out
this fresh.
Exactly.
Yeah. This is okay. Oh, so what do I really think about that?
Right. I mean, I'm learning from my kids all the time. And now, with my two older ones are 11 and 13, my 13-year-old is smarter than I am. I swear. And it's just so amazing. And I love hearing about his perspective. And I thank God that I found it at the time I did, because, 8 years old, that's not early in the game, kind of, when we're talking about children. And I'm just so happy I found it when I did, because now our relationship is so amazing. Like, we're so connected, and I don't have to control him anymore. I really can say that I trust him in what he's doing. And that is like a long time coming. I mean, that's probably been in the past year that I felt that way. And that's not saying everything's perfect, being in connection with your children and your family isn't saying that you never have an argument or get upset or have just issues. It's not always hunky-dory. But it means that we can really discuss issues when they happen.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess that's it, is when you say it's amazing, and it is, and you're so well connected. You worry that people think, it's all candy.
Yes. It's all rainbows and unicorns.
Lollipop rainbow. There you go. There's the phrase I was looking for. But no, it's that connection helps you. Like, even when there's issues and problems and people are worried and upset and everything, that connection is still there. So
yes.
It seems like you're working together.
And
so
it's so
it doesn't
important.
seem like
right.
bad.
Exactly.
Right?
And the connection is so important in those vulnerable times, because to be able to connect into our children when they're not doing their best, they're not feeling their best, even coming down to my 3-year-old, when she's throwing a tantrum or screaming and crying because her toy doesn't look the way she wants it to, I don't have to get upset and control her and make her feel good again. I can just be there with her, and let her be upset and help her as much as I can. And maybe with the 3-year-old, luckily we can kind of guide their attention elsewhere to something that maybe will make them happy, a lollipop. But, with my 13-year-old, when he's upset, I can be there with him too. I don't have to. It even comes down to controlling their feelings, because before, when maybe my kids would get upset, or sometimes we're just used to saying, it's okay. You're fine. You're fine.
Yeah.
Don't cry. We even want to control feelings. And so now with my 13-year-old, even if he's angry, if he's mad at me, I can let him have his anger and be mad, and I'm still connected to him. And it's even growing stronger in those moments, because then I can just be there for him as a support. And he knows that.
Yeah.
I think he knows I'm there, which is huge.
Yeah. It is. It's huge. And yeah, no, it's just, it's wonderful, and it's so different, and it's okay. It's part of the detangling yourself from them, right? They are individuals with their own valid feelings, reactions, everything. And to let them that it's such a fine line, isn't it? You say you let them have it, and if they're upset with me, that's okay, and everything. And then you think, oh, well, do people think then it's just hands off, I just leave them alone, and that's that? No.
No,
There's so much.
Yes. Yeah, that's the thing about unschooling is it's definitely not hands off. And it's learning what that means. Because, you know, when you are in that traditional paradigm, it's kind of like all or nothing, I think, in our head. It's just everything's kind of black and white in the traditional paradigm of parenting. And when you get into unschooling, you realize that it's mostly a big, huge spectrum of gray. I think there's very little black and white. And that was really hard for me because I like things to be black and white. I have to tell you, my natural personality is more of a black and white personality because it helps me. I mean, human beings, we like patterns, right? Yes. We like symmetry and things to fit correctly.
Yep.
And so when things don't, it gets a little tricky. So learning that gray spectrum of, yes, I'm going to let him be angry at me, but no, it's not hands off in any way.
It's how to support them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which is tricky because sometimes he tells me, go away.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to go away. But he still knows I love him. And I'll tell him, I say, okay, I'm going to leave you alone, but I love you.
Mm-hmm. No, exactly.
And not taking it personally, really.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's that connection and that trust underneath that. And the time aspect comes in there too, right? That this doesn't need to be solved right this instant.
Right, exactly.
I don't need you to be...
Exactly.
That advice to never go to bed angry.
Yeah, right.
It's always struck me a little off because we need our feelings and we need to process them in whatever time that it takes us. But to know that the other people are there for us, when we're ready to reach out.
Yeah.
Or ready to, and then that's what we learn too, is even if it's just body language, to know that they're ready for us to come closer.
Right, exactly. And he knows I'm there. I don't know if when I was 13 years old, I was allowed to be angry at my parents or yell at them without there being some kind of repercussion, some sort of consequence to whatever behavior. My son and all my kids know they can be angry and they can be upset. And that doesn't mean they're going to get in trouble later for it or I'm going to punish them for their feelings. They still know I'm there. Now, some things are unacceptable. Obviously, if my kid came up and hit me or hit another one of my kids, that's unacceptable, right? But even with that, it's still not, I'm going to punish you for that.
Yeah, because, when they're upset, angry, anything, that's not fun for them.
No.
They're not doing it to piss you off or something. They are where they are. They're doing the best they can in that moment. And, you're going to have opportunities to talk about that. Most likely not in the moment. You're supporting them and just helping them get through the upset in the moment.
Right.
But after, you can talk about how they got there, what was going on.
Yeah.
You can help them because they don't want that to happen again and again and again.
Exactly.
So you're still supporting them and helping them figure out ways for next time.
Absolutely. Right? And it's important to feel, I think for kids, it's really natural because you have to learn how to handle the big emotions. And so to really be able to do it in a safe space, to go through that little roller coaster ride and then it's okay. And then you can talk about it afterwards and grow from it and learn from it. That alone is going to set you up, I think, pretty
huge.
Well. Yeah.
Yeah. Because to even know, to be able to see the other side of it, right? To see that you can get through it, that there's another side, that you can, make changes and just the whole experience of being able to go through it rather than it being the end of the world, because or you get older and you've never been able. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Or meaning something more than it is. Like when my son was in school, they wanted to say he had, it's called ODD. What is it?
Oppositional defiant disorder. Yes, I know.
Which is basically what it is. Really? Who came up with that? It's really a kid saying, when they told me that was one thing I never agreed with. They told me that, I laughed in their face. And I was my son wants to say no? Like, what does that mean? You know, we expect these children, like, so it doesn't have to mean anything. Like, your kid can get upset. It doesn't mean they're ODD. You know, they can hop from subject to subject. It doesn't mean it doesn't have to mean something. It can just be what it is in that moment. And it means they're human.
Exactly. And to be able to help them understand themselves.
Right.
Right? Isn't that just like, that's a gift that keeps on giving, that no matter what their personality is and who they want to be and all that kind of stuff, to be able to see them for who they are,
right,
and love them,
exactly,
is like,
it's such a gift
for them.
Thank you, Megan. Now let's hear from Teresa Hess. Teresa is an unschooling mom with 3 kids, and I love the name of her blog, Sparkle and Zest. It's so cool. She posted a wonderful manifesto about unschooling and partnership parenting, and here's what she shared when I asked her about it. A couple months ago, you posted a wonderful manifesto on your blog that explains, right, that you're a radical unschooling family, and listing some of the things that you believe that led you to that choice. And I'll put links in the show notes for people because I urge you to go read it. And you talk about how you came to this, and you mentioned this earlier, through parenting, right? I ended up on Jan Hunt's site too, one of my first websites, and I was coming from the school perspective, right? Because my kids were in school. And you landed there from the parenting, and then we both found Unschooling. Anyway, I thought that was really cool. So I was just wondering if you wanted to share a little bit more about what that process looked like and how you came to, really feeling solid now in those beliefs that have led you to this lifestyle.
Right. Well, it's funny. I sort of wrote that blog post several months before I posted it.
Yeah.
I was sort of scared to post it for a while.
I know that feeling.
I wrote it at a time I was sort of feeling doubtful about some choices that we were making, and I needed to remember why I was doing what I was doing. So it's like I needed to sort of talk myself back to what the core of this is for me, because like I say, in the beginning I was looking into schools and alternative schools because I was really longing for community. Community is like such a big thing for me, and it always has been, whether it was like community at the monastery of like-minded people getting together and focusing on something, or in high school and college I was involved in theater, and I just loved being with the people and creating something together. So partly what's been so hard for me with unschooling has been the fact that like no one around me in my daily life is living the type of unschooling lifestyle we are living. Yeah. And that's why it's so nice to like talk to you today. But so that blog post came out of like, I just needed to say it again, even if it was to myself on my blog, like a journal entry. And I think just the act of writing that really helped some I'm sure there'll be more, but at that time, some layers of doubt I was having just dissolve off of me, because it took me just one step more into voicing and owning what I care about without feeling a little bit ashamed or a little bit like, well, we're making these choices that are sort of unusual, but I'll try to hide it a little bit to keep other people more comfortable, or essentially to try to keep myself more comfortable, being worried about maybe other people's judgments. Or I think I wrote that post when I felt like I had been judged, by a neighbor, an acquaintance, just being around moms who are always sort of monitoring, what their kids are doing or eating or watching or saying or playing. It can seep in sometimes and make me feel like, are they right? Am I,
No, really, yeah.
I'm doing something different here, and I think it's radical and necessary what we're doing, but I can start to forget. So so that blog post was just a way for me to remember and like step into my own voice and knowing more. And no, I can't even remember what exactly the question was. I think it was about, go ahead.
I was going to say that part of the question I think you answered earlier when you talked about how you came from the parenting perspective, when you talked about the move to unschooling. So I think that was really cool. But I really love where you took the question just now because, you know, this is hard and it can be challenging and there are ups and downs to it. And I know for me, like everybody's going to discover what works well for them in those moments. For me, writing is what helps me process and figure out what I'm thinking. Find my clarity. Is pages and like I wrote 10 pages in my journal yesterday. As I was trying to make sense. It was an idea that I knew I agreed with, but I had to find all the different aspects. I had to find the thread for me that worked for me, which is what it sounds like you were doing, which is why the manifesto is so awesome to read because it's so clear. Yeah. And you, in the end, you found that thread that led you. These are all the things that make sense to me. And then they added up or they threaded into unschooling. Right? Into radical unschooling, right? Yes. So in those moments, like I did that many times over the years when something's feeling off, when we've had an encounter, when you're feeling judged, like any of those moments that can knock us off, it's okay. Like that's going to happen. That doesn't mean you're a bad unschooler just because, you know, you get knocked off center for a little bit. But finding these ways that help us recenter, that help us, that remind us of those fundamental motivations and reasons why we made this choice in the first place can be so valuable, right?
Yes, and to just shout it from the rooftop on your blog, even if no one's reading it. No, but and then I was going to say another piece that I come to then with that is that I circle around and I'm almost like grateful for these people that maybe were naysaying or judging, or that was my interpretation of what they were saying, because that gave me the opportunity to step more fully into my own knowing and my own confidence rather than, well, if only they were doing what I was doing, then I'd feel better about what I was doing. You know, I don't have to put the responsibility on anyone else. There really is this well within me that knows, that feels this on a like guttural, instinctual, resounding level. And it's like, thank you for reminding me that I'm still wavering and I don't need to. I can like step with both feet right on what I know again and remind myself. So like that's sometimes I really get like tears in my eyes thinking like, thank you for, you know, for saying that thing that really hurt my feelings, you know, because it helped me with my own development and my own knowing. And so like not seeing anyone as the enemy, like they said this that was bad, or if only they did what I was doing. Like, no, none of that. All that falls away. Like it really is all about me and my own journey with knowing what I'm doing is right for us, and everyone else is doing their, and that's awesome too.
Exactly. My goodness, I love the way you put that. I have goosebumps because that ended up being like when I wrote the unschooling journey, that kind of ended up being one of my favorite chapters. That step where at first we can quickly jump to blame other people. Like for where we're uncomfortable. Like when they've said something that's touched a nerve, it's touched a nerve in me, right? For some reason that I don't know yet. And our first reaction so often is to blame them. It's their problem.
Yeah.
You know, but oh my gosh, when we take that moment to just instead go to ourselves, we learn so much more by digging deeper into whatever that issue is. Like, oh, so why did that touch a nerve? What was I feeling uncomfortable about? You know, it was something, right? And it's always been better for me when that's happened. So I was just like laughing here, waiting, because that's been my experience as well. So often, right? When I get upset with something someone else has said or done, it's really about me, right? Because that's my reaction. And that's my opportunity. I can either, choose to get mad at them about it. I can choose to, talk behind their back. I can choose to cut them off. I can make all these choices that blame them for my reaction to whatever it is they said. But like you said, what they're saying is what's true for them in that moment on their journey, because their journey has nothing to do with me. So my reaction has to do with me and my journey. And if I take that step, I learn so much more about myself rather than staying stuck in defensive mode, right?
Yes. Oh, it's awesome.
I love when I was writing that, I'm like, all of a sudden I could see so many times when that happens, like, oh, that's so true.
Right. Yes.
Finding clarity over and over and recentering ourselves are valuable tools for the parenting journey. It's such a great reminder. And our last clip is from Liza Swale. Liza is an unschooling mom with 2 kids, and we dive deep into the value of connected relationships. Here's what she shared when I asked her about ways to nurture our connections with our children.
Okay, so that's what I want to talk about next, was strong connected relationships with our kids that are so valuable for unschooling to flow, like we were just talking about. So that, I guess that's one way. The question was, can you share some ways to nurture those connections? And saying yes and being available when they're excited to share something with you is definitely one of those. I was wondering if you had just some other, tips, but ways that you find helpful to nurture your connection with them.
Yeah, well, I think what's important to note for us too, just by way, I've been my work has been right down part-time for the past 4, almost 5 years. Mm-hmm. So we've actually transitioned out of that, and we're completely on the farm sustaining our life. So, which is great, but what it means is that our life and work and everything is there's no very thin line, if at all, between the two. And we love it. We love that, because it's all about the journey for us, and it's all about living and learning day by day, not only the kids, Luke and I, all of us together, all of these things. So for us, connection is just unbelievably important. It really is. And it's not only for us and the kids, it's for Luke and I, it's for all of us as a family, in order to keep the flow going. And so we actually do make a point of it. And we make a point of it a few ways. Forrest, as I said, Forrest is our shadow. So she's always with us, doing either myself or with Luke. She loves interactions. And for us, we just have always embraced this idea of inspiring the kids through our actions. And so for us, it's always inviting. We're always inviting them to come along. What are we doing? Come. You want to come? You want to come? Come with us. Let's do this. And we're excited about it because we're learning and applying things. And they're excited about it because we ask their opinions and observations. And through that, they either like it or they don't. Finn is not interested in that whatsoever. His enjoyment and love and passion very much involves his space in his game room. And so for us to maintain connections with him, it's very much is a conscious effort on all of us to say we need this connection. He comes out probably 20 times a day for random hugs. That's his thing. He just loves to just come and just get a hug. And then he goes back. Or he'll randomly come out and tell us things, or I'll go in there and connect. But for us, it's very much making that effort with him, and vice versa. And that's something we've talked about as a family, about this need for all of us to embrace him. But we also need to keep this connect so we can feel we're part of that world, and vice versa. As I said, Force is a little easier because she's always there. and the opportunity is always there. The other thing we consciously do as a family, and it's funny because we live together, work together, we do everything together, and this idea of, oh my goodness, you still need to connect. Yes, we do, and we really do. And every year we travel, we make an effort to because we're so grounded and connected to the land here. We need to be free. We need to go release ourselves of that. Wherever, if it's 3 weeks, great. If it's a week, if it's whatever, we need to get away, and that's really where our family connects, but on a different level, and we're recharged. And when you live this life, it's really just living, and so when you're connecting constantly and you're connecting through life and living, you take it for granted in some ways, right? Which is great because you're in the moment, in the flow. It's wonderful, and you're all connecting and acknowledging each other's needs and working through things. It's not always a wonderful journey, but it is. But you get into this rhythm of taking it for granted in certain ways. So when we shift it up and say, instead of Christmas presents, instead of all this, we're going to put that into going away, and that's going to be our memory of the holidays. We're going to get off the farm. We're going to not worry about the animals. We're going to not worry about that. And we're just going to be. And that has been a huge, huge gift to us when your daily life is just all about connection.
Yeah. No, that is a really great point, in that there is something about, well, number one, paying attention just to see, like, it's when you're living together all the time, just to notice, like, if the connection has become a bit more rote or routine, so that everybody's kind of doing the things, but you can sometimes notice that you're not getting a little bit deeper because everybody's got, and that's not necessarily bad. Everybody's got their flow and everybody's flowing easily. And then at some point it's like, haven't heard anything particularly new or whatever for a while. That's all part of the flow and the self-awareness. But there is just something so fun about changing up environments for a bit, right? I mean, it really gives you another opportunity to take that connection to a new place. And then it just takes on a bit of a new life for a while, doesn't it? You've got new things to be talking about, to be working through, to be experiencing together. Like, you guys are still together, right? But it's in this fresh, maybe it just refreshes it for a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's experience together too, right? It's the idea of living and laughing and embracing joy and doing all of these things that we've done. But we also are very seasonal in our existence. Yeah. We've just come off summer. Summer's wonderful. I mean, Forrest attends every farmer's market she can and has since she's been able to vocalize it. She just loves it. It feeds her soul, and she has a whole little world around that. And there's lots of connection there. But it's busy. It's a busy time. And to be able to kind of disconnect, interestingly, from that, and make a conscious effort to say, okay, now we're just going to be, together, exploring, adventuring, which is very much Luke and my route, right? That's how we met.
Yeah.
That's very, we're gypsies at heart in that way. So it's for us, it's very important to show the kids that. And a absolutely fresh connection on different levels. And it just kind of renews or recharges. Where you're living, which is great, but there can be little arcs to that.
Well, you know what? I love that piece too, because for a second, I'd forgotten there. Didn't make the connection, that you and Luke met through travel, and travel is something that is interesting and exciting for you guys, right? And to be able to bring that aspect with you to the family and bring that to the family is awesome. And, for some people who maybe aren't as interested in travel, etc., but you can bring fresh environments and takes. You may just choose to do them in different ways. I know when the kids were young, we used to do little vacation, like weekends into Toronto, into the city, right? And you just go, stay one night at a hotel and we just go visit. Maybe just walk around Harborfront, or because this was different for them, right? From where we were living, so it's fun to think about bringing just freshness to your days every once in a while when you're feeling a need for that. I just wanted to mention that, in case people are being, thinking that freshness meant, having to make big changes or whatever. But, there's so many ways to bring that in if that's something that you're feeling, even bringing it into your home if your kids aren't interested. Anyway, I just really liked that aspect of seeing your connections in new ways, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like this summer we went to visit my parents, and instead of driving, we took the train. Just because, right? Because it was fun, and we could, and it was just something different instead of being on the road, in the car. And it was fun. My kids don't get on the train often, so the whole time it was a wonderful experience and adventure. Which meant nothing but just a different way of transport,
Oh, yeah. See, brilliant. That is a great example, because we can get in our little ruts, for lack of a better word, just the way we always do things. We always go to this library, or we always go to this grocery store, or we always drive to go visit our grandparents. There are always ways to shake things up a little bit if that would be fun, right? And so often it just fresh, go back to fresh. It just brings like a fresh aspect to the day. It's like, oh, look, I have to go find this somewhere different. Everybody's just got kind of new eyes on what could be a more mundane experience, right?
Yeah.
Thanks, Liza. I love that perspective. Always inviting the kids to come along. And how amazing and connecting travel has been for them. I vicariously enjoyed peeking in on a couple of their family vacations through social media, and it looks like a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed this deeper dive into the transition from control-based parenting tools to focusing on connection and consent. It really is a life-changing paradigm shift for the whole family. And then the fun really begins. This is where so much fun and learning bubbles up naturally. Focus on your relationships with your children, and the learning naturally follows. If you're curious about that, check out episode 148, The Value of Relationships for Learning. And remember to have fun. I hope you found this episode helpful on your unschooling journey. And be sure to check out the wonderful archive of earlier podcast episodes. The conversations never go out of date. And you can find more information about my books, my Patreon community, and the Childhood Redefined Unschooling Summit at my website, livingjoyfully.ca. Have a great day.